Sorry, baby's here. Hi, baby. Are you okay? You're recording with mommy. Aww. Hi everyone, I'm here to share with you my experience on how I work with my baby to get her sleeping through the night by the time she was 12 weeks old. And by sleeping through the night, I meant 10 to 12 hours a night with no wakings. First of all, I want to tell you that I'm not a healthcare professional, nor am I a trained sleep consultant. So please consult with your pediatrician before you start any kind of training or experimenting. For example, I didn't start training or experimenting with my baby until she was after her 1-month-old pediatrician checkup, where the doctor told us that she was completely healthy and well. There are many videos out there about the same topic. Just remember that every baby is different, and what worked for my baby may not work for yours, and vice versa. Always pay attention to your baby's cues. My baby is now 100% formula fed. It has been 4 months since her birth, but she's been formula fed at quite an early stage. So perhaps that also contributed to her being able to sleep through the night at an earlier age. Okay, so now let's dive into the story on how my baby managed to sleep 10+ hours by the time she was 12 weeks old. After 2 days at the hospital, I was discharged. We're both well, and we came home to our night nurse, which was really great. I'm so glad we had her because I was able to get up to just pump every 2 to 3 and then 3 to 4 hours eventually. And I'm just so grateful that she was there because I don't have to feed the baby, burp the baby, and try to put the baby back to sleep, which sometimes can take a long time, and by the time you finish all those things, it's like half an hour until the baby's next feeding again, and that means you can't get any sleep. For the 2nd month, that's when the sleep experimenting began. I call it sleep experimenting because I didn't train the baby on purpose, but I was trying out different methods, different routines, different patterns, different objects like pacifiers to see how I can make her sleep better, and also which will also benefit for myself. So as I mentioned, at the 1-month pediatrician visit, the doctor said she was completely healthy and well. So at that point, I just stopped waking her up every 2 to 3 hours to feed to make sure she gets enough bottles. Instead, I waited until she gave us the cue that she wants to eat. So her last feeding every night, then thereafter the 1st month visit, she would eat between 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. and then she'd fall asleep between 7 to 8 p.m. The first stretch was usually very long, so she'd wake again after that between 1 to 2 a.m. in which I would feed her again, and she would go back to sleep, and then every 2 to 3 hours from then on she'd wake up asking for feeding. While this pattern might sound pretty good for some of you, it was tough on me, but it wasn't unmanageable. It was tough because I usually don't go to bed until 10 p.m., which means I only get about 2 to 3 hours of sleep before she wakes up again, but it's manageable because I still get between 5 to 7 hours of sleep in total at night. So I kept this up to ensure that she got enough milk in the 24-hour duration. So then I started asking myself, how can I get her to make longer stretches, at least in the 2nd part of the night? And into the 2nd month, I started the dream feed because from my research and from what people tell me, that seemed to be the most common solution, sleep solution for babies. The idea is to feed the baby between 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. without completely waking her. For example, dark room, no diaper changing, but you still have to burp. If successful, the baby should wake again only after 5 a.m. and then more ambitiously, of course, 6 a.m. At the beginning, this did not work for me. I tried for about 4 days and was completely exhausted because she woke around 2 to 3 a.m. And if you recall, before she actually had longer stretches and then she would wake up between 1 to 2 a.m. It really isn't a huge difference, 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 a.m. So why would I feed her at 10 p.m. for example, instead of just leaving her to sleep the long stretch that she has. Additionally, I have to stay up later so that I can make the dream feed. Because from feeding to burping, it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour depending how good she eats. I stuck it out nevertheless, hoping that, giving it a bit more time, hoping that it will in the end work out. And it did, because throughout the following days she started to stretch a bit more and more and more. So from 2 to 3 she started waking up at between 3 to 4, and then finally around 5. And by the time it was towards the end of the second month, I got pretty comfortable with the dream feed to 5 a.m. schedule, although there would still be a little bit of inconsistency and that she would wake up between 3 to 4 a.m. still sometimes. Finally, one night, she fussed again between 3 to 4 a.m. and I got up, I went to her room, gave her the pacifier so she'd calm down while I go to the kitchen to make the milk. And when I brought the milk back, I found her deep asleep with the pacifier in her mouth. And so I thought maybe I'll just stay with her for a bit to see if she would wake up when the pacifier drops. And after 1 hour, she was deep asleep still. So I went back to my room and I went to bed. And that is when I realized, oh, maybe she's not hungry when she fusses. Maybe she's just uncomfortable. The next night, I didn't feed her when she fussed. I just gave her the pacifier and she slept all the way until 8 a.m. After those couple of nights, I did more experiment. There would be nights where I put her in the sleep sack, but she would like jerk the movement and wake herself up. Then I'll put her back to the swaddle, in which she would sleep better. But then there are other nights where she hates the swaddle and I have to put her in the sleep sack. So it's a lot of going back and forth, trying this and trying that to figure out what works best for your baby. And eventually you kind of notice the pattern of what she prefers. Right now she is settled with sleep sack and she does no longer wakes up anymore. So she would sleep from 7:30 p.m. until 6 to 7 a.m. the next morning. And if she does happen to fuss, like right now she's rolling over, so I just give her the pacifier, help her roll back because she doesn't know how to roll back yet, and then she would fall back asleep. This is how I work with my baby on sleep experimenting, and it's worked really well for us. Like I said, every baby is different, so what worked for me might not work for you. If you want to, you can be like me, try different things, but during those nights of trial and error, you will lose sleep. It could be really difficult, especially when you're already into a pretty good routine like I was, between 7:30 to dream feed, and then all the way till 5. You could get really comfortable with that if you're fine by it, live by it. But I really wanted her to be like my first child, to be able to sleep all the way through the night without any interruptions. At this point, I want to talk about the other factors that will contribute to her sleeping well. The nursery environment. So I keep the room temperature as recommended by the pediatrician, not too hot, not too cold, and maybe even to the cooler side because baby's body temperature is higher than ours. And then I use the white noise machine, which helps cancel out all the inconsistent noise that we may make outside of her room. Finally, we use the blackout curtains so she could distinguish night and day better. Not that she had that problem, because our toddler is always really loud during the daytime, so I don't think the baby gets to fall deep asleep anyway. I would dress the baby for the temperature. So if it's cold, then I'll put maybe like a sweater on her, and then if it's warm, then I would like leave a sleeveless or a thinner sleep sack on her, so she doesn't overheat or feels too cold. But she's also safe. Like for example, I would never use a blanket in the crib even right now, and that's a safety issue. My baby has been sleeping in a separate room in her own crib since the second month, so I keep the baby monitor by my bed and I can hear every noise and sound that she makes. It makes me kind of sensitive to noise, but it has been like that since I became a mother, so I like wake up at the first sign of noise. It also helps her to develop independence so that she doesn't cry when you're not there. But she also knows that when she cries, her mother does hear her and she would be there if she needs it. And I also found that daytime naps doesn't bother us too much because, like I said, we have a toddler and she is loud. So she doesn't really let the baby sleep that deep during the day unless their nap time somehow collide. And then bedtime routine, I don't really have a bedtime routine for her, but I avoid playing too much with her before bed, so as to not make her too hyper. Sometimes I settle her in the crib with the baby mobile on, and sometimes I would hold her until she's almost asleep, then I'll lay her down on her crib. But I try my best to let her sleep independently, like fall asleep independently. Regarding swaddling, for my first child, I swaddled her until she was able to roll over, which means it's no longer safe to swaddle. And for this one, I swaddled her as much as I could, but she hates to swaddle and sometimes she can almost always break free from it, and sometimes she would fuss at night because she was still tied to it. So I would release her and just let her be. And I switched to the sleep sack pretty early so that I don't just keep trying to swaddle her too tight, which blocks her blood flow. But if I had a choice, I would want to swaddle her until she could roll over, because I think it's the safest thing to do. The pacifier, it sometimes helps. For me, it helps my baby a lot with falling asleep, but both my children actually dislike the pacifier at the beginning, but they just kind of get used to it as we go, and we just keep try to give it to them. But if they really push their tongue out with it and don't want it, then I wouldn't force them to have it. Thank you so much for watching my first mom video. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to my channel or click like for more production in the future. Bye for now. Thank you.